For 25 years, I devoted everything to my son James. I sacrificed my career, my relationships, even my health to ensure he had every opportunity in life. I paid for his education, supported his dreams, and stood by him through every challenge. But when I lost my executive position and told him I needed a place to stay temporarily, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're not my problem anymore." What he didn't know was that my former employer had secretly left me $12 million in her will, and I was about to teach him the most valuable lesson of his life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain pelted against the windshield as I drove home from Meridian Industries for the last time. 22 years as Chief Operations Officer, gone in a 15-minute meeting. Corporate restructuring, they called it. A polite euphemism for, "We're replacing you with someone younger and cheaper." At 57, I found myself unexpectedly unemployed. In another life, this might have devastated me. Today, oddly enough, I felt a strange sense of relief washing over me like the rain outside. "You don't seem upset, Olivia," my colleague Diane had remarked as she helped me pack my office. Most people would be falling apart. I'd simply smiled and placed another framed award into a cardboard box. Life has a way of working out exactly as it should. What Diane didn't know, what no one knew, was that 3 months earlier, Victoria, Chen, the founder and CEO of Meridian, had lost her battle with cancer. In her final weeks, she had updated her will, leaving me not only her substantial stake in the company, but also her personal investment portfolio and property holdings. The total value, just over $12 million. "You've been my right hand for over 2 decades, Victoria had told me from her hospital bed, her once commanding voice now barely above a whisper. "I've watched you sacrifice everything for others, for this company, for your son. It's time someone recognized your worth." The inheritance had been processed quietly through Victoria's estate attorneys. The funds now sat in accounts bearing my name, a fact I had shared with no one, not even my son James. James had always been my world. From the moment I held him in my arms as a 25-year-old single mother, I had vowed to give him everything I never had: stability, opportunity, unconditional love. His father had walked away before James was even born, leaving me alone to navigate the terrifying landscape of parenthood. I still remember those early years, working days at an entry-level position at Meridian, taking night classes to complete my business degree, and caring for James during every moment in between. Sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded myself. When James developed severe asthma at age 4, I would sit beside his bed through the night, monitoring his breathing with the vigilance of a soldier on watch. Victoria had noticed my dedication, both to my work and my son. She began mentoring me, creating flexible arrangements when James was ill, and gradually promoting me as I demonstrated my capabilities. By the time James was in high school, I had risen to executive leadership. My son had wanted for nothing. When he expressed interest in attending Westlake University, one of the most expensive private institutions in the country, I liquidated my modest retirement fund to supplement his scholarship. When he needed an apartment during his internship year, I co-signed the lease and covered the security deposit. When he and his wife Meredith wanted to purchase their first home 4 years ago, I provided the down payment, nearly $85,000 that represented years of careful saving. "You'll inherit everything someday anyway," I had told him with a smile when he expressed hesitation about accepting such a large sum. "Consider it an advance on your inheritance." The irony of those words wasn't lost on me now. The sprawling, Tudor-style house came into view as I turned onto Oak Terrace Lane. Situated in one of the city's most prestigious neighborhoods, the home reflected James and Meredith's rapid ascent into upper-middle-class stability. James had secured a position at a respected marketing firm after graduation, while Meredith worked as an architectural designer for a boutique firm catering to wealthy clients. Their home, with its manicured lawn and tasteful landscaping, was a physical manifestation of their carefully curated image, an image I had helped make possible through years of financial support and personal sacrifice. I pulled into the circular driveway, noting Meredith's sleek black SUV and another vehicle I recognized as belonging to her mother, Sylvia. The sight of Sylvia's car sent a small flutter of apprehension through my chest. My relationship with my daughter-in-law's mother had always been cordial but cool. Sylvia Preston came from old money and had never quite approved of her daughter marrying someone whose mother was merely a corporate employee. Gathering my courage along with my purse and the small box of personal items from my office, I approached the front door. I hadn't called ahead to announce my visit or share my news. Perhaps some part of me had wanted the security of being in my son's presence when I finally gave voice to my changed circumstances. The door opened before I could ring the bell. James stood in the entryway, tall and handsome in his casual Friday attire, a look of surprise crossing his features. "Mom, we weren't expecting you. Is everything okay?" "I need to talk to you about something," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." His expression softened slightly. Despite everything, James had always been a compassionate young man. It was one of the qualities I had worked hardest to instill in him. "Of course not. Come in. Meredith and Sylvia are here. We were just discussing some renovation plans for the kitchen." I followed him through the foyer into the expansive kitchen, where Meredith and Sylvia sat at the marble-topped island, architectural drawings spread before them. Both women looked up as we entered, their expressions shifting subtly from engagement to polite acknowledgement. "Olivia?" Sylvia nodded, her voice carrying that particular inflection that somehow managed to convey both greeting and dismissal in the same breath. "What a surprise." "I hope I'm not interrupting," I said again, setting my box on a nearby console table. "Not at all," Meredith replied, though her quick glance at the wall clock suggested otherwise. "We were just reviewing some contractor bids. Would you like some tea?" "That would be lovely, thank you." As Meredith busied herself with the electric kettle, an uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. I took a seat at the island, acutely aware of the scrutiny from both James and Sylvia. "Are those your office things?" James finally asked, gesturing toward the box I'd brought in. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, that's actually why I'm here. Meridian underwent a corporate restructuring today. My position has been eliminated." The words hung in the air, their impact rippling through the room like a stone dropped in still water. I had expected concern, perhaps some reassurance. What I saw instead was something altogether different. James's expression shifted from surprise to calculation so quickly I might have missed it had I not been watching closely. Sylvia's eyebrows rose fractionally, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth before she quickly suppressed it. And Meredith froze momentarily before resuming her tea preparation with deliberate movements. "Eliminated?" James echoed, his voice carefully neutral. "After 22 years? Just like that?" "Corporate reshuffling," I explained, adopting the same euphemism that had been used with me. "They're bringing in new leadership, younger perspectives. It's not uncommon in today's business climate." "But they gave you a severance package, right?" James asked, leaning forward slightly. "Something substantial after all those years?" The question wasn't, "Are you okay?" or "How are you feeling?" It was about money, immediate, practical implications. I felt a small pang of disappointment but pushed it aside. James had always been pragmatic, a trait I'd encouraged as he navigated his early career. "The details are still being worked out," I said carefully, accepting the tea Meredith placed before me. "But I wanted to let you know right away because, well, this changes things for me. I'll need to reevaluate my living situation, my expenses. I might need to stay with you for a little while until I figure things out." The atmosphere in the kitchen shifted immediately, as palpable as a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. James and Meredith exchanged a quick glance that contained an entire conversation. Sylvia's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Stay with us?" Meredith repeated, her voice higher than usual. "Like, move in?" "Just temporarily," I clarified quickly. "A few weeks, maybe a month or two while I sort out my next steps. I'll help with expenses, of course, and with the baby coming, I thought maybe I could be useful around the house." Another weighted glance between my son and his wife. Something was happening here that I didn't fully understand. "About that," James began, his voice taking on that particular tone he used when delivering unwelcome news to clients. "We've actually already converted the guest room into a nursery. The decorator just finished last week." "Oh," I said, momentarily thrown off balance. "Well, I could sleep on the pull-out sofa in your home office. I really wouldn't need much space." Sylvia cleared her throat delicately. "James and Meredith have actually designated that room as my space when the baby arrives. I'll be staying for the first few months to help with the newborn." She offered me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. A grandmother's touch is so important in those early days. The implication was clear. Her role as grandmother was somehow more legitimate, more valuable than mine. The subtle dismissal stung more than I cared to admit. "I see," I said quietly, wrapping my hands around the warm teacup. "I hadn't realized you'd made those arrangements." "It just makes sense," Meredith interjected quickly. "Mom has experience with newborns. She raised 3 of us. And since she doesn't work, she can be here full-time." The unstated comparison hung in the air. Unlike me, Sylvia had been a stay-at-home mother, able to devote herself entirely to her children without the distraction of career ambitions. "Plus," James added, his voice gentling slightly, "we thought you'd be busy with your job. This is unexpected." I took a careful sip of tea, using the moment to compose myself. "Life often is." "Mom," James said, leaning forward with an expression of practiced concern, "maybe this is actually perfect timing. You've always talked about wanting to travel, to see the world. You've got your severance, your retirement savings. This could be your opportunity to finally focus on yourself." His words sounded supportive, even generous. But there was an undertone I couldn't ignore, a subtle pushing away, a careful distancing. My son wasn't offering me shelter in a difficult time. He was suggesting I should disappear entirely, to pursue dreams I'd barely mentioned in passing and certainly couldn't afford on non-existent retirement savings he assumed I had. "James," I said carefully, "I appreciate the sentiment, but the reality is that I need to be practical right now. I don't have extensive savings. What I had, I invested in you, in your education, in helping with your down payment. I'm not in a position to travel the world." A flicker of something, irritation, guilt, crossed his features before he schooled his expression back to polite concern. "Well, there must be other options," he said. "What about your friend Patrice? Doesn't she have a spare room in her condo?" The suggestion felt like a physical blow. My own son was actively searching for alternatives to having me in his home, even temporarily. Something fundamental shifted inside me in that moment, a painful clarity cutting through years of willful blindness. "Actually," Sylvia interjected, before I could respond, "I might have a solution." She turned to me with a smile that seemed almost predatory. "My brother oversees Wellington Pines, that assisted living facility on the north side of town. They're always looking for mature, responsible individuals to join their staff. Room and board included for live-in positions. Given your situation, It might be perfect. Assisted living facility, live-in position, room and board. The words struck me one by one, each landing with precise, devastating impact. At 57, having served as an executive for over a decade, my son and his mother-in-law were suggesting I take a job as an aide in a retirement home, not out of compassion for the elderly, but as a solution to their inconvenient mother problem. Wellington Pines, I repeated slowly, the name bitter on my tongue. You think I should apply for a job as a caretaker at Wellington Pines? James had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. It was just a suggestion, Mom. We're just trying to brainstorm solutions here. Solutions? I echoed. To the problem of me needing temporary shelter after losing the job I've held for 22 years. The job that paid for your education, your first apartment, the down payment on this house. The room fell silent. My words, spoken quietly but with unmistakable clarity, seemed to hover in the air between us. That's not fair, Meredith said. Finally, her voice tight. We're grateful for everything you've done, but we have our own lives now. We're starting a family. We need space. And I need a place to stay, I replied simply. Not forever, just until I find my footing. James sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. Mom, be reasonable. We don't have the space. We don't have the setup. It's just not practical. Not practical. As if my years of sacrifice had been practical. As if love could ever be reduced to a calculation of convenience. In that moment, looking at the son I had given everything for, I felt something deep within me finally snap free, like a branch that had been bent too far for too long suddenly released from tension. I understand, I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening within me. Thank you for the tea, Meredith. I should be going. I stood, gathering my purse and the small box of office belongings. No one moved to stop me. Mom? James called as I reached the doorway. We'll figure something out. Maybe we can help you find an apartment, something affordable. It's not that. We don't want to help, it's just that you don't want to help in any way that actually inconveniences you. I finished for him, turning back one last time. It's all right, James. I understand perfectly now. And I did understand. For the first time in 25 years, I saw my relationship with my son with perfect clarity. The scales had fallen from my eyes, and though the vision was painful, there was also a strange relief in finally seeing the truth. As I walked to my car through the gentle rain, I felt lighter somehow, as if I had set down an impossibly heavy burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The burden of unconditional, giving without reciprocity. The burden of love without respect. Victoria's final words to me echoed in my mind as I started the engine. Olivia, you've spent your life pouring into others. Now it's time to pour into yourself. She was right. It was time. And with $12 million at my disposal, I would rebuild my life on my own terms, without the constraints of others' expectations or the limitations of others' gratitude. My son had no idea what he had just thrown away, but he would learn. Oh yes, he would learn. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The dashboard clock read 6:42 p.m. as I pulled into the parking lot of the Lakeside Hotel. Rain continued to fall steadily, transforming the world outside into a blur of muted colors and reflected lights. The elegant five-star establishment stood as a beacon against the darkening sky, its illuminated entrance promising warmth and comfort, if one could afford it. 3 hours earlier, I had been sitting in my son's kitchen, being gently but firmly directed toward employment at an assisted living facility. Now, I was checking into the presidential suite of the city's most exclusive hotel. Good evening, Ms. Winters, the concierge greeted me with practiced warmth as I approached the reception desk. "We received your reservation request. The presidential suite has been prepared for you." "Thank you," I replied, presenting my identification and credit card. "I appreciate the short notice accommodation." "Not at all, ma'am. Ellington Hotels prides itself on exceeding expectations." His eyes flickered momentarily to my simple attire and the small box of office belongings I still carried. A curious combination for someone booking a $2,800 per night suite. But his professional demeanor never wavered. As he processed my information, I reflected on the whirlwind of the past few hours. After leaving James's house, I had pulled into a quiet coffee shop parking lot and allowed myself 10 minutes of pure, unfiltered emotion. The tears had come suddenly and forcefully, years of suppressed hurt breaking through carefully constructed dams of rationalization and hope. When the storm passed, I had made 3 phone calls in rapid succession. First to Victoria's attorney to arrange access to my inheritance funds, second to this hotel to secure immediate accommodation, and third, to Eleanor Blackwood, Victoria's personal real estate agent, to begin the search for a permanent home. The suite was breathtaking, a sprawling 1,800 square feet of understated luxury, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline and lake beyond. A welcome basket containing Dom Perignon champagne and artisanal chocolates sat on the marble countertop of the kitchenette, alongside a handwritten note welcoming me to the Ellington experience. I placed my box of office mementos, awards, photographs, and the small jade elephant Victoria had given me after my first successful acquisition negotiation, on the expansive desk in the suite's office nook. Then I moved to the windows, watching raindrops trace patterns down the glass as lights began to illuminate the cityscape. For the first time in decades, I had no obligations. No meetings to prepare for, no presentations to finalize, no one depending on me for anything. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating, like standing at the edge of a vast, uncharted territory. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. "James. Mom, I'm sorry if things got awkward today. We were caught off guard. Let's talk tomorrow when everyone's had time to think. Love you." I stared at the message, noting what it didn't say. No acknowledgement of his rejection, no offer of actual help, no genuine apology. Just a diplomatic postponement designed to ease his conscience. In the past, I would have responded immediately, assuring him everything was fine, that I understood completely. I would have minimized my own hurt to protect his comfort. Tonight, I simply set the phone aside without replying. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the secure portal Victoria's attorneys had established for managing my inheritance. The numbers on the screen still seemed surreal. $12.4 million in diversified assets, including Victoria's controlling shares in Meridian Industries, her investment portfolio, and 3 properties across the country. "Use it wisely," she had told me during our final conversation, her once commanding voice fragile but determined. "Not just for security, but for joy. You've earned both." Joy. When was the last time I had made a decision based purely on what would bring me joy rather than what would benefit others? I couldn't remember. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Room service had arrived with the dinner I'd ordered, a selection of my favorite foods that I rarely indulged in: seared scallops, truffle risotto, and chocolate soufflé. Simple pleasures I had denied myself for years, always redirecting funds toward James's needs or saving for some future emergency. As I savored each bite, I opened a new document on my laptop and began to type. The next chapter, a strategic plan. Old habits die hard. Even my personal reinvention would benefit from proper planning. I created sections for immediate needs, short-term goals, long-term vision, and, most importantly, a section titled Boundaries and Relationships. Under this last heading, I wrote, Relationship with James to be conducted on new terms, equal respect, mutual consideration, no financial entanglements. The words felt both liberating and painful. I loved my son deeply, but I had finally recognized the toxic pattern we had established. My constant giving and his constant taking had created an imbalance that diminished us both. For both our sakes, this pattern needed to end. By midnight, my strategic plan had taken shape. I would purchase a home in Riverview Heights, the exclusive community overlooking the city's waterfront. I would establish a philanthropic foundation focused on supporting single mothers pursuing education and career advancement. I would travel to the destinations Victoria and I had often discussed but never visited: Kyoto during cherry blossom season, the Greek islands, the Norwegian fjords. And I would do it all without seeking permission, validation, or approval from anyone. The following morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the suite's windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean sky of brilliant blue. It felt symbolic somehow, as if nature itself was acknowledging my fresh start. Over breakfast, I reviewed my calendar for the day: a 10 a.m. meeting with Eleanor Blackwood to view potential properties, a noon appointment with Victoria's financial advisor to establish access to my investment accounts, and a 3 p.m. consultation with Agnes Chen, Victoria's personal stylist. My phone had accumulated 7 missed calls overnight: 3 from James, 2 from Meredith, 1 from Sylvia, and 1 from my former assistant at Meridian. I listened to their voicemails in sequence, an illuminating progression of escalating concern and calculation. James, 9:15 p.m. Mom, I'm a little worried. You didn't respond to my text. Just checking you're okay. Call me when you get this. Meredith, 9:40 p.m. Olivia, James is concerned because he hasn't heard from you. Please call us back so we know you're all right. James, 10:30 p.m. Mom, seriously, where are you? We're getting worried. At least text me to let me know you're safe. Sylvia, 11:05 p.m. Olivia, your silence is causing unnecessary stress for James and Meredith. This kind of emotional manipulation isn't helpful to anyone. Please be an adult and call your son. The message from my assistant Caroline was different. Ms. Winters, I wanted to check on you. The way they handled everything today was unprofessional and disrespectful. I've worked with you for 7 years, and I know your value even if they don't. If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to call. I mean that sincerely. The final messages from James and Meredith at around 7 a.m. this morning revealed the true source of their escalating concern. James: Mom, I just went by your apartment and you're not there. Your neighbor said she hasn't seen you since yesterday morning. Where are you? This isn't like you. Meredith: Olivia, we're really worried now. James called the hospitals, but no one matching your description has been admitted. Please call us back. Also, we realized we need to discuss some financial matters. The mortgage payment is due next week, and we've always counted on your contribution. There it was, the truth beneath the concern. They had always counted on my financial contribution. My monthly deposits into their account had become an expected entitlement rather than a generous gift. Moreover, they had gone to my apartment without permission, presumably to continue our conversation on their terms, in a space where I would feel vulnerable rather than in their territory. I composed a single text message in response. I'm safe and well, taking time to process yesterday's conversation and plan my next steps. We'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk further. Then I silenced my phone, placed it in the suite's safe, and prepared for my day. Today wasn't about James or his concerns. Today was about me. Eleanor Blackwood met me in the hotel lobby at precisely 10 a.m. In her mid-60s, with immaculately styled silver hair and a tailored navy pantsuit, she emanated confidence and discretion. Victoria spoke very highly of you, she said after introductions. She told me you had an exceptional eye for value and potential. That's kind, but Victoria was the visionary, I replied. I was just good at implementing her vision. Eleanor's shrewd eyes assessed me. Don't diminish yourself, Ms. Winters. Victoria didn't tolerate that from anyone, especially not from you, according to her. I smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for my departed friend and mentor. Even now, she was advocating for me through the people who had known her best. Now then, Eleanor continued, consulting her tablet. Based on your parameters, I've identified 3 properties that might suit your needs, all in Riverview Heights, all offering privacy, security, and exceptional views. The first showing is in 20 minutes. Shall we? Eleanor's car, a sleek black Mercedes, glided through the morning traffic toward Riverview Heights. As we ascended, the winding road leading to the exclusive community, I felt a momentary flutter of doubt. Did I truly belong among the city's elite? Was I overreaching? Victoria's voice seemed to whisper in my ear. Imposter syndrome is just fear wearing a disguise. You've earned your place. Take it. The first property was a contemporary masterpiece of glass and steel, perched on the hillside with unobstructed views of the lake and city below. The second was a more traditional estate, with manicured gardens and classic architecture. Both were beautiful, but neither felt right. The third property, however, spoke to me the moment we pulled through the gates. A modern interpretation of Mediterranean design, it featured warm stone exteriors, generous windows, and multiple terraces cascading down the hillside. At 5,200 square feet, it was substantially larger than I needed, but its layout felt both intimate and expansive. The current owners are relocating to Europe, Eleanor explained as we toured the sun-drenched great room. They're motivated to sell quickly and have already reduced the asking price to $3. $8 million. 3 months ago, such a figure would have seemed astronomical, completely outside the realm of possibility. Today, I simply nodded and asked, Is there room to negotiate? Further? Eleanor's slight smile suggested approval of my approach. I believe we could present a compelling offer at $3.5 million, especially if you're prepared to close quickly. Draft the offer, I said decisively. I'd like to close within 30 days if possible. As we continued the tour, my phone began vibrating persistently in my purse. Likely James calling from a different number after I hadn't responded to his texts. I ignored it, focusing instead on imagining my life in this space. The eastern terrace would be perfect for morning meditation. The kitchen was ideal for exploring the culinary interests I'd shelved years ago. The library could house the book collection I'd always wanted to build. This would be my sanctuary, my reward, my new beginning. May I make an observation, Ms. Winters? Eleanor asked as we stood on the main terrace overlooking the spectacular view. Of course. In 20 years of real estate, I've learned to recognize the look people get when they find their true home. It's not about the fixtures or the square footage. It's about seeing possibilities for their future self. She gestured toward the horizon. You had that look the moment we walked through the door. I smiled, feeling a sense of certainty I hadn't experienced in years. You're right. This is where I begin again. By the time we returned to the hotel, the offer had been drafted, reviewed, and submitted. Eleanor promised to call the moment she heard back from the sellers, which she anticipated would be within 24 hours given their motivation. As she departed, she handed me an elegant business card. Victoria asked me to give you this when the time was right. I believe today qualifies. The card bore a single name, Marguerite DeVoe, and a phone number. Who is she? I asked. Eleanor's smile was enigmatic. Someone who helped Victoria reinvent herself after her divorce 15 years ago. She specializes in transformations. After Eleanor left, I returned to my suite and finally retrieved my phone from the safe. 23 missed calls, and 37 text messages. A digital bombardment that would have sent me into a panic of responsiveness just 24 hours earlier. Today, I set the phone aside once more and opened my laptop to review the final document from my meeting with Victoria's financial advisor, Mr. Takahashi. The inheritance was now fully accessible, with accounts established in my name at 3 different financial institutions to diversify risk. The philanthropic foundation I envisioned was in the initial stages of formation, with preliminary paperwork filed. Everything was proceeding according to my strategic plan. Everything except one element, the boundaries and relationships section. Eventually, I would need to speak with James, to establish new parameters, to make clear that while my love remained unconditional, my financial support would no longer be automatic or expected. But not today. Today was still about me, about taking the first steps on a journey Victoria had made possible, and my son had unwittingly accelerated. As evening approached, I stood on my suite's balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. My phone rang yet again, James's number for perhaps the 30th time today. This time, I answered. "Hello, James." "Mom?" His voice was a mixture of relief and irritation. "Where have you been? We've been worried sick." "I went to your apartment called hospitals. I told you I was safe," I interrupted calmly. "I needed time to think." "Think about what? And where? Are you?" "There's background noise. Are you at a restaurant?" "I'm at the Ellington Hotel." A pause, followed by confusion. "The Ellington? Why would you—" "That place costs a fortune, Mom. How are you paying for that when you just lost your job? This doesn't make sense." "Many things will make more sense soon," I replied. "But right now, I'm still processing our conversation from yesterday." "Mom, about that, we weren't rejecting you. We were just caught off guard. Of course we want to help you. We're family. Family supports each other." The words were right, but the tone revealed the subtext. He was attempting to manage a potentially problematic situation, not expressing genuine remorse. "Yes, family does support each other," I agreed. "In both directions." Another pause. Longer this time. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we need to talk about our relationship going forward, James. But not tonight. I'll contact you when I'm ready." "Ready?" "Mom, what's going on with you? This isn't like you at all. And what about the mortgage payment? It's due on the 1st. The question confirmed everything I had realized about our dynamic. Even now, his primary concern was financial. "Make the payment from your own account, James. You and Meredith both have excellent jobs. But you've always—" "Things change," I said simply. "We'll talk soon." "Good night, James." I ended the call before he could respond, feeling a complex mixture of sadness and resolution. The conversation hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. The first step in establishing a healthier relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. My phone immediately lit up with another incoming call, but I declined it and returned to watching the sunset. Tomorrow would bring new developments. The seller's response to my offer on the house, my consultation with the mysterious Marguerite, DeVoe, perhaps more attempts from James to re-establish the status quo. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply exist in this moment of transition, no longer defined primarily as someone's mother, someone's employee, someone's support system, but as Olivia Winters, a woman fully capable of building her own future, on her own terms. Victoria had given me the financial means to reinvent myself, but James had inadvertently given me something equally valuable. The clarity to recognize that I deserved more than I had settled for, and the courage to claim it. Marguerite DeVoe's atelier occupied the entire top floor of a discreet building in the Arts District. Unlike the flashy boutiques that dominated the city's luxury shopping corridors, there was no prominent signage, no window displays, just A brushed bronze plaque beside a private elevator that simply read, DeVoe. It had been 3 days since Eleanor Blackwood had given me her card. 3 days of contemplation before I finally placed the call. The voice that answered had been warm, accented, and utterly self-assured. "I've been expecting you, Ms. Winters. Victoria told me about you years ago." Now, as the elevator doors opened directly into an airy, sun-filled studio space, I found myself facing a striking woman in her early 60s. Tall and elegant, with closely cropped silver hair and piercing green eyes, she exuded a confidence that was immediately magnetic. "Olivia Winters," she said, extending her hands in greeting. "Finally, we meet. Victoria spoke of you often." "She never mentioned you," I admitted, accepting her gesture. Marguerite's laugh was genuine and unrestrained. "Of course not. I was her secret weapon, as I will be yours if you wish it." The atelier contained no racks of clothing, no conventional displays. Instead, the space featured several seating areas, a wall of floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and what appeared to be a digital scanning station in one corner. "Victoria came to me 15 years ago," Marguerite explained, guiding me to a comfortable seating area overlooking the city. She had just divorced that fool Raymond and found herself suddenly defined by his absence rather than her own presence. She was, as the Americans say, lost. A young assistant appeared silently with a tray bearing an elegant tea service. As she poured, Marguerite continued, "What I offered Victoria, what I offer all my clients, is not merely a wardrobe. Any competent stylist can dress a woman appropriately for her coloring and body type." She waved her hand dismissively. "What I create is a visual language that communicates exactly what my client wishes the world to understand about her. It is psychology, strategy, and art in equal measure." I sipped the fragrant tea, considering her words. "And what did Victoria wish the world to understand about her?" Marguerite's smile was knowing. That she was formidable, unapologetic, that her power came from within and was neither inherited from her father nor borrowed from her husband. She leaned forward slightly. "And you, Olivia, what truth do you wish to communicate?" The question caught me off guard. In all my years of professional success, I had thought of my appearance as simply appropriate. Conservative suits for an executive who wanted to be taken seriously, who didn't wish to draw attention to herself as one of the few women in leadership. "I'm not entirely sure," I admitted. "Then let us begin there." Marguerite set down her cup and studied me with unabashed directness. "Tell me about the moment that brought you here. Victoria said it would come. The catalyst that would finally make you see your own worth clearly." I found myself describing the scene in James's kitchen, the casual dismissal, the suggestion that I should work at Wellington Pines. As I spoke, Marguerite listened with complete attention, occasionally nodding but never interrupting. "So," she said when I had finished, "you have spent decades diminishing yourself to elevate your son, only to discover he sees you merely as a resource rather than a complete human being with her own value and needs." Her blunt assessment was startlingly accurate. "Yes. And now you wish to reclaim your power, your visibility, your right to take up space in the world on your own terms." "Yes," I said again, feeling the truth of it resonate through me. Marguerite nodded decisively. "Then we begin with honesty. You have been hiding, Olivia, hiding your intelligence behind self-deprecation, hiding your femininity behind conservative attire, hiding your true self behind the role of selfless mother." She gestured toward the mirrors. "Let us see what emerges when you stop hiding." What followed was unlike any shopping or styling experience I had ever imagined. There were no clothing racks wheeled out for me to browse, no fashion magazines to flip through for inspiration. Instead, Marguerite conducted what felt more like a psychological evaluation, asking questions about my earliest memories, my secret pleasures, my unrealized dreams. You played piano as a child? She asked at one point. Until college, I confirmed. I was quite good, actually. And why did you stop? It wasn't practical. I was pregnant with James, working full-time, taking night classes. There was no time, no money for such luxuries. And now? I considered the question. Now. I could have a piano in my new home. I could play again. Marguerite nodded, approvingly. What else did you abandon in service to practicality? The question opened a floodgate. Art history classes I'd excelled in but never pursued further. A talent for watercolor painting my high school teacher had encouraged me to develop. A fascination with architectural design. A dream of visiting every major opera house in Europe. You see, Marguerite said softly, you have been living a fraction of your possible life. Only after this extensive conversation did Marguerite turn to the practical matter of clothing. Her assistant conducted a digital body scan while Marguerite made notes on a tablet. I will create a complete wardrobe concept for you, she explained. Not individual pieces, but a comprehensive visual language aligned with your authentic self and strategic goals. You will return in 3 days for the presentation. As I prepared to leave, Marguerite handed me a slim volume bound in soft leather. Homework, she said with a small smile. Each evening until you return, write one entry addressing this question. If you were freed from all external judgments and expectations, who would you choose to be? The elevator doors closed on her enigmatic expression, leaving me to contemplate this assignment during the ride down to the lobby. When I emerged onto the street, my phone indicated 3 missed calls from James. I had maintained minimal contact with him since our brief conversation 3 days ago, responding to his increasingly anxious messages with short texts assuring him I was well but not yet ready to meet. This time, I chose to call him back. Mom? He answered on the first ring, his voice a mixture of relief and irritation. Where have you been? I've left you a dozen messages. I've been busy, I replied. Simply, house hunting among other things. House hunting? His tone shifted to confusion. But you can't afford. I mean, with your job situation, shouldn't you be looking at apartments? Or maybe considering roommates? The assumption was so telling that without my executive position, I would naturally need to downsize dramatically, to accept reduced circumstances as my new reality. Actually, I've made an offer on a house in Riverview Heights, I said conversationally. It was accepted yesterday. I close in 3 weeks. Silence then. Riverview Heights? Mom, those houses are millions of dollars. What's going on? Are you in some kind of trouble? Have you taken out loans you can't possibly repay? The concern in his voice wasn't for my well-being, but for the possibility that I had become financially reckless and might need bailing out. I'm not in trouble, James. Quite the opposite. But we do need to talk about some changes going forward. What kind of changes? His wariness was palpable. The kind best discussed in person. I'll be free next Tuesday afternoon. We could meet for lunch at Meridian. Meridian? But that's... He stopped himself, clearly about to comment on the restaurant's exclusive reputation and high prices. Tuesday works. I'll move some things around. After we disconnected, I stood for a moment on the sunlit sidewalk, conscious of a peculiar sensation I was still learning to identify. Personal power. Not power derived from my professional position or my role as someone's mother, but power rooted in self-determination and choice. It was exhilarating. It was terrifying. It was long overdue. My driver, another luxury Victoria had insisted upon in her will was a car service at my disposal for the first year, was waiting discreetly at the curb. As I slid into the back seat, my phone chimed with an incoming email from Eleanor Blackwood. The home inspection on the Riverview property was complete, with only minor issues identified. The closing date was confirmed for 3 weeks from today. Where to, Ms. Winters? my driver inquired. I consulted my calendar. The Carlton Gallery. Please, I have an appointment with the director at 2. Victoria's will had included her impressive art collection, which I had yet to relocate from the temperature-controlled storage facility where it had been housed since her passing. Julia Carlton, the gallery director, had been Victoria's trusted advisor for decades, helping her build a collection that reflected both personal taste and investment wisdom. I can't tell you how pleased I am that Victoria's collection will remain intact, Julia said once we were seated in her elegant office. So many collections are dispersed after death, the carefully curated relationships between pieces lost forever. I wouldn't dream of breaking it up, I assured her. Though I admit I'll need guidance on how to properly display and care for everything. Julia's smile was warm. That's exactly why Victoria stipulated that my services remain available to you. She knew you would honor her legacy while making it your own. As we discussed the logistics of moving the collection to my new home, I found myself particularly drawn to a contemporary sculptor's work that Victoria had collected extensively. Morgan Chen's work spoke to her deeply, Julia explained, showing me images on her tablet. The way he balances strength and vulnerability, structure and fluidity. Victoria always said his sculptures embodied her philosophy of leadership, flexible but unbreakable. I studied the graceful bronze forms with new appreciation. She never mentioned him to me. Victoria compartmentalized her life quite strictly, Julia observed. She once told me that she had different confidants for different aspects of herself. No one person knew the complete Victoria except Victoria herself. The insight resonated unexpectedly. I too had compartmentalized, though perhaps not strategically as Victoria had, but as a form of survival. Work Olivia was competent, analytical, unemotional. Mother Olivia was selfless, supportive, eternally patient. But who was the complete Olivia? Did such a person even exist after decades of selective self-expression? Marguerite's homework question echoed in my mind. If you were freed from all external judgments and expectations, who would you choose to be? By the time I returned to the Ellington that evening, I felt both energized and contemplative. The presidential suite had begun to feel like home, temporary though it was. I had arranged my few personal items thoughtfully. Victoria's jade elephant. On the desk, fresh flowers delivered daily. A cashmere throw I'd treated myself to draped over the sofa. I opened Marguerite's leather-bound journal and began to write, the words flowing more easily than I'd expected. If I were freed from all external judgments and expectations, I would be unapologetically complex. I would acknowledge my intelligence without minimizing it to make others comfortable. I would express opinions without first calculating their reception. I would wear color instead of the neutral palettes I've hidden behind. I would create beauty through music, through art, through transforming spaces. I would be visible. I would be heard. I would take up space not as an apology, but as a right. The next morning, I received a message from Caroline, my former assistant at Meridian. She had reached out several times since my departure, her loyalty a touching reminder that not all professional relationships were merely transactional. Ms. Winters, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to let you know that there are some concerning developments at Meridian. The new COO, Mr. Brendan Foster, has already begun dismantling several of your key initiatives, including the Women's Leadership Development Program and the Sustainability Committee. Many of us are distressed by the direction things are taking. I know you have other priorities right now, but I thought you should be aware. I read the message twice, aware of a familiar surge of responsibility. My instinct was to immediately intervene, to protect the programs I had nurtured over years, to fight for the corporate culture I had helped build. But then I paused, remembering Victoria's parting gift to me. Not just financial freedom, but her controlling shares in Meridian Industries, shares that gave me significant voting power on the board. Power I had not yet acknowledged or utilized. This realization shifted something fundamental in my understanding of my current position. I was not powerless to affect change at Meridian. In fact, I potentially held more influence now as a major shareholder than I had as COO. I replied to Caroline, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Please don't worry. Some changes will be coming soon at Meridian. In the meantime, keep detailed notes on all policy shifts and their impacts." Then I contacted Victoria's corporate attorney, requesting a complete briefing on my voting rights as a shareholder and the procedures for calling a special board meeting. The remainder of the day passed in a flurry of productive activity. I met with the architect who would oversee minor renovations to my new home, approved the initial charter documents for my philanthropic foundation, and scheduled a piano tutor to help me rediscover my abandoned musical talents. That evening, as I wrote in Marguerite's journal, I added a new dimension to my emerging self-concept. I would use power strategically rather than apologetically. I would recognize that influence wielded with intention is not something to hide from, but to embrace as a tool for creating positive change. I would acknowledge that my voice matters, my vision matters, and I have earned the right to shape the world around me according to my values. By the time Tuesday arrived, the day of my scheduled lunch with James, I had undergone a subtle but significant shift, not just in my circumstances, but in my fundamental sense of self. Marguerite's homework had forced me to articulate aspects of my identity that had long been suppressed or neglected. The woman who entered Meridian Restaurant at precisely noon was not the same woman who had left her son's house in the rain less than 2 weeks earlier. I wore an outfit Marguerite had sent over, a beautifully tailored suit in a rich sapphire blue rather than my usual navy or black, with architectural lines that somehow managed to be both authoritative and distinctly feminine. James was already waiting at the table, his expression shifting from impatience to surprise as I approached. His eyes widened slightly, taking in my transformed appearance. "Mom?" He stood awkwardly, clearly unsure how to navigate this new version of his mother. "You look different." "Thank you," I replied simply, taking my seat as the maitre d' held my chair. "It's good to see you, James." He returned to his seat, visibly recalibrating. "You too. We've been worried." "There's no need for concern. I'm doing quite well." "So I see." His gaze traveled to my attire, the elegant restaurant, the deferential service. "Though I'm still not clear on how any of this is possible. You've lost your job, you're staying at the Ellington, you've put an offer on a house in Riverview Heights. It doesn't add up." I smiled, accepting the menu from the server. "That's actually why I wanted to meet today, to explain some recent developments and discuss how they'll affect our relationship going forward." James's expression tensed. "What kind of developments?" "Let's order first," I suggested. "This conversation deserves our full attention." Throughout the ordering process, I could sense James's growing impatience. His foot tapped nervously under the table, his fingers fidgeted with his water glass. The James I knew was always in control of every situation, always the one setting the agenda. Today's dynamic, me calmly directing the pace of our interaction, was foreign territory. Once the server had departed with our orders, I folded my hands on the table and met his gaze directly. 3 months ago, Victoria Chen passed away. I began. "Your boss, right?" James nodded impatiently. "I remember you were upset about it." The dismissive characterization of my 22-year relationship with Victoria as simply boss and my profound grief as merely being upset was telling. James had never bothered to understand the depth of that connection because it didn't directly impact him. "Victoria was my mentor, my colleague, and my dear friend," I corrected gently. "What you don't know, what no one knew, is that in her will, Victoria left me her controlling shares in Meridian Industries, her investment Portfolio and several properties. James stared at me, incomprehension slowly giving way to shock. What are you saying? I'm saying that I am now the primary shareholder of Meridian Industries and the beneficiary of Victoria's considerable estate. In financial terms, I'm worth approximately $12 million. The color drained from James's face. 12 million? Yes. I took a sip of water, allowing him time to process this information. But why didn't you tell us? When you came to the house that day, when you said you'd lost your job, I wanted to see how you would respond to me needing help, I said, quietly. Not to test you exactly, but to understand the true nature of our relationship. Whether you valued me as your mother or merely as a financial resource. James flinched as if I'd struck him. That's not fair. You came to us saying you needed a place to stay, right after telling us you'd lost your job. What were we supposed to think? You were supposed to think that your mother, the woman who raised you, who has supported you financially and emotionally, your entire life, needed help. And your response was to suggest I become a caretaker at an assisted living facility. That was Sylvia's suggestion, not mine, he protested weakly, which you didn't contradict. In fact, you reinforced it by telling me I couldn't stay with you because you'd already converted the guest room to a nursery without even discussing it with me. James's expression cycled rapidly through shock, defensive anger, and calculation. I could almost see the moment when he realized the implications of my newfound wealth, what it might mean for him if he could navigate this conversation correctly. Mom, I'm so sorry if we made you feel unwelcome. We were caught off guard, that's all. Of course, we would have figured something out if we'd known you were serious about needing a place to stay. If you'd known I was serious, I repeated softly, because a mother needing shelter isn't automatically taken seriously? He had the grace to look ashamed, if only momentarily. That came out wrong. I just meant, it's been a stressful time. With the baby coming, and Meredith's mother being so involved, and the renovations. Our first course arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As the server arranged our plates, I observed James surreptitiously studying me, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. When we were alone again, I continued. I understand stress, James. I understand pressure and competing priorities. What I've come to realize, however, is that I have consistently been at the bottom of your priority list, useful for financial support, but otherwise an afterthought. That's not true, he protested, but without conviction. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my life, my interests, my dreams? When have you ever considered my needs instead of your own? He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to produce a specific example. That's what I thought, I said gently. Our relationship has become unbalanced, James. I've been giving, you've been taking, I've been supporting, you've been expecting that support as an entitlement. That dynamic ends today. Fear flashed across his features. What does that mean? Exactly? It means I will no longer be contributing to your mortgage payments. It means I will not be available as an automatic source of funds whenever you encounter a financial shortfall. It means I am reclaiming my right to prioritize my own needs and interests. So you're cutting me off? His voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby diners. I'm establishing healthy boundaries, I corrected. I will always be your mother, James. I will always love you. But from now on, our relationship will be built on mutual respect and reciprocity, not financial dependence. He stared at me, apparently struggling to reconcile this new reality with his understanding of our relationship. And the $12 million? What are you planning to do with that? The question was revealing in its directness. Not congratulations on my good fortune, not happiness for my security, but immediate focus on how my wealth might still be accessed. I'm purchasing a home in Riverview Heights. I'm establishing a philanthropic foundation focused on supporting single mothers pursuing education and career advancement. I'm traveling to places I've always wanted to see. I'm reclaiming interests and talents I set aside decades ago. I smiled slightly. I'm living, James, fully and on my own terms, perhaps for the first time since you were born. Our main courses arrived, the conversation pausing once more. I noted that James had barely touched his appetizer, his appetite apparently diminished by the seismic shift in our power dynamic. When we were alone again, he attempted a different approach. Mom, I'm happy for you, really. You deserve this, after everything you've done for me. And of course you should enjoy your inheritance. He stumbled slightly over the word, as if still processing its magnitude. But we're still family. Meredith and I were having your grandchild. Doesn't family support each other? Yes, I agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. Family does support each other. But support flows in both directions, James. It's not a one-way extraction of resources. He nodded quickly, apparently sensing an opening. Exactly. And we want to support you too. In fact, now that I understand your situation better, I realize how perfect it would be for you to live closer to us. There's actually a property just a few blocks from our house that's on the market. It would be ideal for you to be nearby when the baby comes, to be part of our daily lives. The swift pivot from suggesting I work at Wellington Pines to proposing I purchase a home near them was breathtaking in its transparency. Suddenly, my presence was not an inconvenience but an asset, not because they valued me more, but because they understood my financial value differently. That's a lovely suggestion, I said diplomatically, but I've already committed to the Riverview property. It speaks to me in a way I can't quite explain. Disappointment flickered across his features. But that's so far from us. You'll miss so much of the baby's daily life. I'll visit regularly, I assured him, and you and Meredith are welcome to visit me as well once I'm settled. Of course, he said quickly. We'd love that. Your new place sounds amazing. The remainder of the lunch proceeded with a strained politeness, James clearly struggling to adjust to our transformed dynamic. When the check arrived, I placed my card on the tray without hesitation, ignoring James's perfunctory offer to pay. As we prepared to leave, James made one final attempt to salvage his access to my resources. Mom, about the nursery. Meredith and I were talking, and we realized we could actually convert my home office instead. That would leave the guest room available for you whenever you wanted to stay over, for extended visits with the baby. The offer, so belated, so transparently motivated by his new understanding of my financial situation, might once have filled me with pathetic gratitude. Today, it merely confirmed the wisdom of my decision to establish clear boundaries. That's thoughtful, James, but unnecessary. I'll be quite comfortable in my new home. When I visit, I can always stay in a hotel if it's too late to drive back. His face fell slightly. A hotel? But that's so impersonal. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but it allows everyone their space and independence, don't you think? Outside the restaurant, as we prepared to part ways, James attempted one last approach. Mom, wait. There's something else I wanted to discuss. Meredith and we've been thinking about private school options for the baby. The best ones require applications years in advance, and there are considerable deposits. I raised a hand, gently interrupting him. James, I won't be financing your child's education. That responsibility belongs to you and Meredith as parents. But you paid for my education, he protested. All of it. Yes, I did, because that was my choice as your mother, just as how you finance your child's education will be your choice as a parent. He stared at me, genuinely baffled by this refusal. I don't understand what's happened to you. You've always been so generous, so willing to help. I'm still generous, I corrected him. But now my generosity will be guided by reciprocity and respect, not automatic obligation. That's the difference. As my driver pulled up to the curb, I turned to James one last time. I love you, James. I always will. But part of love is allowing people to grow, to face challenges, to develop their own resources and resilience. I didn't understand that before. I thought love meant constant sacrifice and support. I was wrong. Real love sets appropriate boundaries. Real love respects itself as well as others. I left him standing on the sidewalk, his expression a complex mixture of confusion, calculation, and the dawning realization that a fundamental shift had occurred, not just in our circumstances, but in our relationship itself. As my car merged into traffic, I felt a profound sense of peace. The conversation had been difficult but necessary. The first step in establishing a healthier relationship with my son, one based on mutual respect rather than his expectation, of endless giving and my pattern of endless sacrifice. My phone chimed with a message from Marguerite DeVoe. Your wardrobe concept is complete. Tomorrow at 11? I smiled, typing a quick confirmation. The external transformation was proceeding, in tandem with the internal one, a visible manifestation of my emerging authentic self. Victoria had given me financial freedom, but James had inadvertently given me something equally valuable. The clarity to recognize that I deserved more than I had settled for, and the courage to claim it. For that unintended gift, paradoxically, I would always be grateful. The Meridian Industries boardroom fell silent as I entered. 14 sets of eyes tracked my movement, some wide with surprise, others narrowed with calculation, a few gleaming with barely concealed hostility. I had chosen my attire for this moment with Marguerite's careful guidance. A structured crimson dress with an architectural neckline, subtle but unmistakable gold jewelry, and heels that added authority to my already confident stride. Ms. Winters, Raymond Sullivan, the board chairman, recovered first. This is an unexpected pleasure. We weren't aware you would be joining us today. Yet here I am, I replied pleasantly, taking the empty seat at the far end of the table. As the holder of Victoria Chen's voting shares, I believe I have both the right and responsibility to participate in these proceedings. A ripple of murmurs circulated around the table. Victoria's death 3 months earlier had created a temporary power vacuum at Meridian, one that several board factions had been maneuvering to fill. My termination as COO had been part of that maneuvering, a strategic elimination of Victoria's most loyal executive. What they hadn't known was that Victoria had already ensured her legacy would continue through me. Of course, Raymond said carefully, his expression suggesting this was anything but of course to him. We're discussing the third quarter projections and the strategic initiative proposed by our new COO, Brendan Foster. I nodded toward Brendan, a sharp-featured man in his early 40s who had been brought in from a competitor specifically to dismantle much of what Victoria and I had built. Please continue. I'm eager to hear Mr. Foster's vision for Meridian's future. The next hour was enlightening. Brendan's presentation outlined an aggressive cost-cutting strategy that would boost short-term profits at the expense of the company's long-term health. Slashing the research and development budget, eliminating the Women's Leadership Program, reducing sustainability initiatives, and restructuring the benefits package to reduce company contributions to employee retirement plans. It was precisely the sort of short-sighted, extractive approach that Victoria had spent her career fighting against. When Brendan concluded, several board members offered immediate praise. Impressive numbers, one commented. The shareholders will be pleased with these quarterly returns. Which shareholders would those be? I asked mildly. The institutional investors looking for sustainable long-term growth, or the speculators hoping to cash in on a temporary stock bump before selling their positions. The room quieted again, all eyes returning to me. Meridian has always taken a more balanced approach, I continued. Victoria Chen built this company on the principle that profit and purpose aren't mutually exclusive, that taking care of our employees, our communities, and our environment is good business in the long run. With all due respect, Ms. Winters, Brendan countered, his tone suggesting very little respect indeed. Victoria Chen is no longer with us. Markets evolve. Companies must adapt or die. I couldn't agree more, I replied. Adaptation is essential. The question is, adapt toward what? Toward a model that extracts maximum value in the short term at the expense of long-term viability? Or toward a model that builds lasting resilience and sustainable growth? Raymond cleared his throat uncomfortably. These are philosophical questions, certainly worth considering. But today we need to vote on the specific initiatives Mr. Foster has proposed. Of course, I said. Before we do, I'd like to distribute some materials I've prepared. My assistant, Caroline, whom I'd rehired in a new capacity as my personal strategic advisor, entered on cue, distributing folders to each board member. What you're looking at, I explained as they opened the folders, is an alternative strategic initiative, one that maintains Meridian's commitment to sustainability and employee development while still delivering competitive returns to our shareholders. The documents were comprehensive: financial projections, market analyses, risk assessments, and detailed implementation plans. I had spent weeks working with Victoria's financial team to develop this counter-proposal, ensuring it was not merely idealistic but financially sound. This is thorough, Raymond acknowledged reluctantly, scanning the materials. I've always believed in coming prepared, I replied with a small smile. You'll note that my proposal actually projects stronger 5-year returns than Mr. Foster's approach, with significantly lower employee turnover costs and enhanced brand value. Brendan's face had darkened progressively as he reviewed the documents. These projections are optimistic at best, fantasy at worst, he said dismissively. The market won't reward this kind of thinking. Interesting perspective, I observed. Would you care to explain why Meridian's stock has outperformed our competitors by an average of 12% annually under precisely this kind of thinking for the past decade? Before he could respond, I turned back to the broader group. As Victoria, Chen's designated proxy, I control 37% of Meridian's voting shares. I will be voting against Mr. Foster's proposal and in favor of the alternative I've presented. I invite each of you to consider carefully which approach truly serves Meridian's long-term interests. The vote that followed was close, but decisive. 9 in favor of my proposal, 5 opposed. Brendan Foster sat rigid with barely controlled fury, while Raymond Sullivan's expression suggested he was rapidly recalculating his political alignment within the company. As the meeting adjourned, several board members approached to congratulate me on my unexpected but impressive return to Meridian's leadership circles. Their sudden warmth was as transparent as it was insincere. They were simply adapting to the new power dynamic, repositioning themselves as allies rather than adversaries. Caroline walked beside me as we exited the building. That went even better than we projected, she observed quietly. Bernstein and Watkins were supposed to be firmly in Foster's camp, but they flipped their votes after reviewing your materials. People respect thorough preparation, I replied, and they respect power when it's wielded with clear purpose. What happens to Foster now? I considered the question. Nothing immediately. He'll remain as COO for now. Removing him too quickly would create unnecessary disruption, but he'll operate within the strategic framework we've established, not his own. And if he resists, then he'll discover that adapting is indeed essential for survival, I said simply. The confrontation in the boardroom had been exhilarating in ways I hadn't anticipated. Not because I enjoyed conflict, I didn't, but because I had finally claimed my rightful voice in a space where I had previously allowed myself to be undervalued. I had advocated not just for myself, but for the vision Victoria and I had shared. For Meridian, a company that succeeded by creating value for all its stakeholders, not just by extracting profit for a select few. As my car moved through the afternoon traffic toward my next appointment, I reflected on how much had changed in just 3 weeks. I had gone from being summarily dismissed from my executive position to effectively controlling the company's strategic direction, from being suggested as a potential caretaker at Wellington Pines to establishing myself as a force to be reckoned with in Meridian's boardroom. The decisive board meeting had been just one element of my transformation. 3 days earlier, I had closed on my Riverview Heights home, a process accelerated by my ability to pay in cash. The renovations were already underway, supervised by an architect who specialized in creating spaces that reflected their owners' authentic personalities and values. Yesterday, I had finalized the charter for the Winters Foundation for Women's Advancement, endowing it with $3 million to support single mothers pursuing education and career advancement. The foundation would provide not just financial assistance, but comprehensive support, childcare subsidies, mentorship programs, professional development, and networking opportunities. And tonight, I would host a small dinner gathering at the Ellington, my first social event as this new version of myself. The guest list was selective: Eleanor Blackwood, Marguerite DeVoe, Julia Carlton, Caroline, and 2 other women who had been Victoria's trusted advisors and friends. Not colleagues forced together by professional obligation, but women I genuinely respected and whose company I enjoyed. When I arrived at the hotel, the events coordinator greeted me warmly. "Everything has been arranged according to your specifications. Ms. Winters, the private dining room is prepared, the menu confirmed, and the pianist will begin at 7:30 as requested." "Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate your attention to detail." In my suite, I found a delivery from Marguerite, the final pieces of my wardrobe concept, including an elegant ensemble for tonight's dinner. The accompanying note read simply, "To claim your space with grace. M." The evening unfolded beautifully. My guests arrived punctually, each bringing unique energy and perspective to the gathering. The conversation flowed naturally from business to art, from philosophy to fashion, from personal histories to future aspirations. There was laughter, thoughtful debate, and moments of surprising vulnerability as these accomplished women shared, not just their successes but their struggles and doubts. "I must say, Olivia," Eleanor observed during a quiet moment, "this transformation suits you remarkably well. Victoria would be proud." "Not just of how you've handled the inheritance," Julia added, "but of how you've found your voice. That was always her hope for you, you know." "Was it?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Oh, yes," Marguerite confirmed. "She spoke of it often, how much potential she saw in you beyond your professional capabilities. Olivia doesn't yet realize her own power, she would say, but someday she will, and then, watch out, world." The thought of Victoria holding such faith in me was deeply moving. She had seen in me something I hadn't yet seen in myself, a strength and authenticity waiting to be claimed. Her gift to me hadn't been just financial freedom, but the catalyst for self-discovery. As the evening wound down and my guests departed, I found myself reflecting on the contrast between this warm, engaging dinner and the countless corporate events I had attended out of obligation rather than pleasure. How different it felt to create a gathering based on genuine connection rather than professional networking, to choose company that energized rather than depleted me. Back in my suite, I was preparing for bed when my phone chimed with an incoming text. "James. Mom, I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call when you can." 3 weeks had passed since our lunch at Meridian. During that time, James had made several attempts to reconnect, each with a different approach. First apologetic, then concerned, then practical, and finally, when those failed to elicit the response he wanted, increasingly urgent. I had maintained polite but firm boundaries, responding to his messages with brief acknowledgments, but declining invitations for further in-person meetings. Not as punishment, but as a necessary space for both of us to adjust to our new relationship. dynamic. This latest message, with its claim of importance, might once have sent me immediately to the phone, ready to solve whatever problem my son was facing. Tonight, I simply noted it and decided to respond in the morning. Whatever James considered important could wait a few hours. My boundaries were not just words, but actions, consistent choices that reinforced my new understanding of healthy relationships. The next morning, after my usual meditation and a leisurely breakfast, I called James. "Mom," he answered immediately, his voice tight with what sounded like stress. "Thanks for calling back." "Of course. Your message said it was important?" "Yes. It's about the house. We've hit a serious problem with the renovation budget. The contractors found structural issues that weren't in the inspection report, and the estimates for fixing everything have basically doubled. We're talking about at least $60,000 we don't have." So this was the importance, not a health crisis or emotional emergency, but a financial shortfall he expected me to fill. "That sounds stressful," I acknowledged. "What options are you considering?" He paused, clearly thrown by my question. In the past, I wouldn't have asked about his options. I would have immediately offered assistance. "Well, that's why I'm calling you. We thought, given your situation, you might be able to help us out. Just this once, for the baby's sake." For the baby's sake. The invocation of my unborn grandchild as emotional leverage was both predictable and disappointing. "James," I said gently, "I'm not going to provide the $60,000. Mom, please, this isn't just some frivolous expense. It's about making our home safe for your grandchild. I understand that the repairs are necessary. What I don't understand is why this is presented as my responsibility rather than yours. Because we don't have that kind of money just sitting around." His frustration was audible. "We've depleted our savings with the down payment and initial renovation costs. The only option without your help would be taking out a high-interest loan or putting it on credit cards." "Those are certainly options," I agreed. "You might also consider scaling back other renovation plans to accommodate these essential repairs, or possibly selling the house and purchasing something more within your means." His incredulous laugh held no humor. "Sell the house? Are you serious? After everything we've put into it? After all the plans we've made for the baby?" "James, I understand you're disappointed, but my decision remains. I won't be providing the money." There was a long silence then. "I don't understand what's happened to you. You've always been there for me, always helped when I needed it. Now suddenly you have all this money, but you won't help your own son?" The emotional manipulation was so transparent it was almost textbook. 3 weeks ago, it might have worked. Today, I recognized it for what it was. I'm still here for you, James. I still love you. But financial rescue is no longer part of our relationship. You and Meredith are capable adults with good incomes. You'll find a solution that works for your family. So that's it? You're just going to let us struggle while you live in luxury up in Riverview Heights? I'm going to allow you the dignity of solving your own problems, I corrected him, which is something I should have done years ago. After we disconnected, I felt the familiar pang of maternal guilt attempting to reassert itself. Had I been too harsh? Should I have offered at least partial assistance? Was I punishing James for his earlier rejection? I took a deep breath, recognizing these thoughts as the old patterns trying to reclaim territory. This wasn't about punishment or withholding. It was about establishing healthy boundaries. James and Meredith had the resources to solve this problem themselves. They might not solve it in the way they preferred, without sacrifice or compromise, but they were entirely capable of finding a solution. My phone chimed with an incoming email from the Winters Foundation director I had recently hired. The first round of scholarship recipients had been selected, 10 remarkable single mothers pursuing degrees ranging from nursing to engineering to education. My contribution would potentially change not just their lives, but their children's futures as well. This was how I chose to deploy my resources now, not in enabling dependency, but in empowering independence. Not in solving problems for those who should solve them themselves, but in creating opportunities for those who had been denied them. As I prepared for my meeting with the interior designer for my new home, I reflected on how profoundly my perspective had shifted in just a few short weeks. I no longer saw my worth as measured by what I could give to others, but recognized my inherent value as a complete person with my own needs, desires, and boundaries. The journey wasn't complete. Transformation never is. There would be moments of doubt, backsliding into old patterns, challenges to my new boundaries. But with each choice to honor myself, with each decision aligned with my authentic values, the new path became more established, more natural, more truly mine. Victoria's gift had provided the means, but the real transformation had come from within. From finally recognizing that I deserved to live fully, to claim my power, and to define my own worth on my own terms. And for that awakening, I owed much to the very rejection that had once seemed so painful. Sometimes, I reflected with a small smile, the greatest gifts come disguised as losses. And sometimes, the most valuable inheritance isn't what's in your bank account, but what you discover within yourself when everything else is stripped away. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new home, casting long golden shadows across the polished hardwood floors. After 6 weeks of careful renovations, I had finally moved into the Riverview Heights property, transforming it from an elegant but impersonal structure into a space that truly reflected who I had become. The library, my favorite room, had been designed with both beauty and purpose in mind. Custom bookshelves lined the walls, gradually filling with volumes on art, business, philosophy, and architecture. A baby grand piano occupied the corner, near the windows, its gleaming surface catching the light. I had resumed lessons 3 weeks ago, my fingers gradually remembering patterns they had abandoned decades earlier. Victoria's art collection, carefully installed throughout the house, under Julia Carlton's expert guidance, added both beauty and meaning to each space. The Morgan Chen sculpture, a graceful bronze form suggesting both movement and stillness, held pride of place in the entryway, greeting visitors with its quiet confidence. I was reviewing the quarterly reports for the Winters Foundation when my phone chimed with an incoming call from an unexpected source, Meredith. In the 2 months since my confrontation with James over the renovation costs, our communication had been minimal. He had eventually sent a terse message informing me they had secured a home equity loan to cover the repairs, a practical solution he could have reached without attempting to make his problem my responsibility. Olivia? Meredith's voice sounded strained, lacking its usual polish. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, I replied, setting aside my work. Is everything all right? A pause, then. Not really, no. I need to talk to someone, and I didn't know who else to call. The vulnerability in her tone was so uncharacteristic that I felt immediate concern. What's happening, Meredith? James and we're not doing well. The stress of the renovation issues, the pregnancy, his mother-in-law's constant presence, it's all coming to a head. I waited, sensing there was more she needed to say. Last night, he told me he thinks we made a mistake getting married, she continued, her voice breaking slightly. That he feels trapped, that he resents the baby, that he misses his freedom. The revelation was jarring but not entirely surprising. James had always struggled with commitment, with accepting the consequences of his choices. It was a pattern I had enabled by consistently removing obstacles from his path, by making his problems my responsibility. I'm sorry, Meredith, I said, gently. That must have been painful to hear. The thing is, she continued, I don't even completely disagree with him. We rushed into marriage because my parents expected it. We bought a house we couldn't really afford because it was the right neighborhood. We're having a baby because it's time. None of these decisions came from what we actually wanted. Her honesty was surprising and refreshing. In all our previous interactions, Meredith had projected nothing but certainty and ambition, her life unfolding according to a careful plan. This glimpse of doubt and self-reflection revealed a depth I hadn't previously recognized. "Would you like to come over?" I offered. Perhaps it would be easier to talk in person. A brief hesitation then. "Really? You wouldn't mind?" "Not at all. I can text you the address." 2 hours later, Meredith sat across from me in my sunroom, cradling a cup of herbal tea, her 7 months pregnant form silhouetted against the panoramic view of the city below. Her eyes had moved appreciatively around the space when she first arrived, taking in the thoughtful design, the artwork, the subtle but unmistakable luxury. "Your home is beautiful," she said. "It feels peaceful." "Thank you. That was intentional. Creating a space that supports reflection and creativity rather than just impressing visitors." She nodded slowly. "That's what's missing from our house. It's all about appearances, about meeting expectations. There's no peace anywhere." "Including between you and James?" "Especially between us." She set down her teacup with a sigh. "We've been performing our roles rather than actually connecting. The perfect young professional couple, the perfect home, soon the perfect family. It's exhausting." "And your mother's involvement hasn't helped, I imagine." A flash of surprise crossed her features, followed by a rueful smile. "You noticed that, did you?" "No, it hasn't helped. She means well, but she's always had very specific ideas about how my life should look. The right husband, the right address, the right everything. James and I both got caught up in trying to create this picture-perfect existence, and somewhere along the way, we lost ourselves." I was struck by her self-awareness, her willingness to acknowledge her own role in creating an unsustainable situation. It showed a maturity I hadn't given her credit for. "What do you want, Meredith? Not what your parents want for you, not what society expects. What do you want?" She looked startled by the question, as if no one had ever asked her that before. Perhaps no one had. "I want—" she began hesitantly, then paused to consider her words carefully. "I want to feel authentic, to make choices based on my own values, not external expectations. I want a partnership where we support each other's growth instead of just maintaining appearances." Her hand moved unconsciously to her pregnant belly. "And I want my child to grow up in a home filled with genuine love and acceptance, not performance and pressure." "Those are worthy desires," I said softly. "And not impossible to achieve, though they may require difficult choices." "Like the ones you've made," she observed. "You've changed so much in these past months, found your voice, created boundaries, built this beautiful life." She gestured to the space around us. "How did you do it?" I considered her question carefully. I think it started with a painful recognition that I had been defining my worth by what I gave to others rather than by my inherent value as a person. Once I understood that, I could begin making choices aligned with my authentic self instead of solely responding to others' needs and expectations. That sounds both liberating and terrifying. "It is both," I acknowledged with a smile. "Freedom always comes with responsibility. The responsibility to define your own path, to accept the consequences of your choices, to create meaning on your own terms." "I'm not sure I know how to do that," Meredith admitted. "I've always followed the script, my parents' script, society's script. The idea of writing my own is overwhelming." "You don't have to figure it all out at once," I assured her. "Transformation is a process, not an event. It happens one choice, one boundary, one act of courage at a time. We talked for hours as the sun completed its arc and began to set, painting the sky in vivid pinks and purples. Meredith shared more about her relationship with James, their struggles with financial pressures and family expectations, her fears about impending motherhood, her doubts about the life they had constructed together. I listened without judgment, offering perspective when appropriate but mostly providing what Meredith seemed to need most: the space to hear her own thoughts without immediately being told what to do about them. As evening approached, she finally asked the question that had clearly been on her mind throughout our conversation. "Why did you invite me here today? After everything that happened, after how poorly we treated you when you lost your job. I wouldn't have blamed you for hanging up on me." "Because holding grudges serves no one," I replied honestly. "And because beneath all our differences, we share a common humanity. You were in pain, you reached out, and I could offer support. It's as simple and as complicated as that." She studied me with newfound respect. "I misjudged you. We all did. I'm sorry for that." "Thank you for saying so. And Meredith, whatever you decide about your marriage, your home, your future, trust yourself. You're more capable than you realize." After seeing her to the door, I returned to the sunroom, watching as the last light faded from the sky and the city below began to glitter with evening illumination. The conversation with Meredith had been unexpected but illuminating, a reminder that beneath carefully constructed facades, most people struggle with the same fundamental questions. Who am I? What do I truly want? How do I reconcile external expectations with internal truth? My phone chimed with a message from Caroline. "Board packet for next week's meeting attached. Also, thought you'd want to know, Brendan Foster has submitted his resignation." I wasn't surprised. Since the decisive board meeting 2 months earlier, Brendan had found himself increasingly marginalized as the company realigned with the strategic vision I had presented. Rather than adapt, he had chosen to depart, likely to an environment more amenable to his particular style of leadership. His resignation represented the final step in reclaiming Meridian's direction, in honoring the legacy Victoria had entrusted to me, not through confrontation or force, but through offering a more compelling vision and demonstrating its viability. As I reflected on the day's developments, my phone rang again. James. I answered with some trepidation, uncertain of his state of mind given what Meredith had shared. "Mom," he began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "I think I've made some serious mistakes." The admission was so unlike the James I knew, always confident, always certain, never acknowledging error, that it took me a moment to respond. "What's happening, James?" "Everything's falling apart. Meredith left this morning, said she needed space to think. The renovation costs have basically bankrupted us. And I just..." He paused, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't know who I am anymore. I've been so focused on creating this perfect image, this perfect life, that I never stopped to ask if it was what I actually wanted." The echo of Meredith's earlier sentiments was striking. Beneath their polished exterior, both had been struggling with the same fundamental disconnect between appearance and authenticity. "Would you like to come over?" I offered, echoing my earlier invitation to Meredith. "Perhaps we could talk things through in person." "Really?" His surprise was evident. "After everything? After how I treated you?" "Yes, James. You're still my son. That hasn't changed, even if our relationship has evolved." An hour later, James stood in my entryway, taking in the space with wide eyes. It was his first visit to my new home, his first tangible encounter with the life I had created for myself. "This is incredible," he said, following me into the living room. "I knew you'd bought a place in Riverview, but I didn't imagine." "Something this personal?" I suggested, gesturing for him to take a seat. That was intentional. Every element here reflects choices I've made about who I am and how I want to live. He nodded slowly, seeming to truly see me perhaps for the first time. Not as his mother, not as a resource, but as a whole person with my own identity and purpose. I think that's what's missing from my life, he said quietly. I've been so busy trying to prove something, to Meredith's family, to society, to myself, that I never stopped to figure out what I actually value. What kind of life would bring me genuine satisfaction? It's never too late to ask those questions, I told him, though the answers may require difficult choices. Like selling the house? Meredith mentioned you suggested that when we were facing the renovation crisis. I was angry then, but now. It actually seems like the most sensible option. We bought more than we could afford, trying to impress people who were never going to be impressed anyway. The acknowledgement was a significant step for James, recognition that external validation was a poor foundation for life decisions. Selling might create space, literal and figurative, to build something more authentic, I suggested. Something based on your genuine needs and values rather than appearances. But what about the baby? Meredith's due in 2 months. I can't just abandon my responsibilities. No one's suggesting that, I assured him. Being responsible doesn't mean maintaining an unsustainable situation. It means making thoughtful choices that serve everyone's genuine well-being in the long run. As the evening progressed, our conversation deepened. James spoke of his fears about fatherhood, his uncertainty about his career path, his growing recognition that he had been seeking validation in all the wrong places. I shared more about my own journey, the painful awakening that had led to my transformation, the process of reclaiming my authentic self, the ongoing work of maintaining healthy boundaries. I've been so focused on what you could give me, he admitted at one point, that I never stopped to consider what you might need. What kind of support or recognition would matter to you? I'm sorry for that, Mom, truly. The apology was simple but profound, an acknowledgement of my personhood separate from my utility to him. It was perhaps the most meaningful gift he could have offered. Thank you, James. That means a great deal to me. So where do we go from here? He asked. How do we rebuild our relationship? One interaction at a time, I replied, with honesty, mutual respect, and appropriate boundaries. Not as a return to old patterns, but as the creation of something healthier for both of us. As James prepared to leave, he paused in the entryway, gazing at the Morgan Chen sculpture with unexpected appreciation. It's beautiful, he said. It seems balanced somehow. Strong, but not rigid. That's what drew Victoria to Chen's work, I explained. The balance of strength and flexibility. The suggestion that true power comes not from dominance but from integration. Victoria. Sounds like she was quite remarkable, he observed. I wish I'd taken the time to know her when she was alive. She was remarkable, and she saw something in me that I hadn't yet seen in myself. I smiled at my son, recognizing the parallel. Perhaps that's the greatest gift we can offer each other, seeing and affirming possibilities that haven't yet been realized. After James departed, I sat in the quiet of my home, reflecting on the day's unexpected developments. Both Meredith and James had reached turning points in their lives, moments of reckoning where the disconnection between external performance and internal truth had become too painful to sustain. Their journeys reminded me of my own, the painful catalyst, the disorientation of questioning fundamental assumptions, the tentative steps toward authentic self-expression. Though the specifics differed, the underlying process was strikingly similar. Perhaps that was the nature of transformation. Not a linear path unique to each individual, but a universal human experience of awakening to greater authenticity. Perhaps we were all engaged in variations of the same essential journey, learning to honor our intrinsic worth, to align our choices with our deepest values, to create lives that reflected our genuine selves rather than others' expectations. My phone chimed with a message from Eleanor Blackwood. Thinking of you today. Victoria always said the true measure of wealth is not what you have, but who you become. You've proven her right. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for Victoria's faith in me, for the gift that had catalyzed my transformation, and for the wisdom I was continuing to discover within myself. The journey wasn't complete. It never would be. But each step brought greater clarity, greater alignment, greater peace. As I prepared for bed, I reflected that perhaps the most valuable inheritance I had received wasn't the financial windfall or the controlling shares in Meridian, but the opportunity to discover who I truly was beneath the roles and responsibilities that had defined me for so long. And for that awakening, I had many to thank. Victoria for her generosity, James for the painful rejection that had forced me to reassess everything, and most importantly, myself for finding the courage to claim a life that honored my authentic worth. The fortune had provided means, but the true transformation had come from within, from finally recognizing that I deserved to live fully, to claim my power, and to define my own worth on my own terms. Sometimes I reflected as I drifted towards sleep. The greatest gift is not what life gives you, but what you discover within yourself when circumstances force you to look deeper than you ever have before. Ms. Winters, they're ready for you now. I looked up from my tablet to see the young program coordinator standing in the doorway, her expression a mixture of excitement and nervous respect. Behind her, I could hear the muted buzz of conversation. From the auditorium, nearly 300 attendees gathered for the official launch of the Winters Foundation's mentorship initiative. 6 months had passed since my conversations with Meredith and James, 6 months of continued growth and evolution. The foundation had moved from concept to reality with remarkable speed, already supporting 25 single mothers through education and career advancement programs. Today marked the expansion of those efforts with the introduction of a comprehensive mentorship network connecting these women with established professionals across various industries. Thank you, Sophia. I'll be right there. As I gathered my notes and smoothed the lapels of my tailored jacket, another Marguerite Deveau creation, elegantly structured in deep emerald, I took a moment to center myself. Public speaking had never been my favorite aspect of leadership, but I had grown increasingly comfortable with visibility as my confidence in my authentic voice strengthened. The audience rose as I took the stage, their applause washing over me like a wave. Among the faces, I recognized several Meridian board members: Eleanor Blackwood, Julia Carlton, Caroline, and, somewhat unexpectedly, Meredith, seated near the back, her newborn daughter cradled against her shoulder. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice steady and warm. "Thank you for joining us for this milestone in the Winters Foundation's journey. When we launched 6 months ago, we had a vision to create opportunities for single mothers facing the seemingly impossible task of advancing their education and careers while supporting their families. Today, I'm proud to announce that we're expanding that vision through our Constellation Mentorship Network. As I outlined the program's structure and objectives, I felt a deep sense of alignment between my words and my purpose. This wasn't just another corporate initiative or philanthropic gesture. It was the culmination of my own lived experience, the challenges I had faced as a single mother, the barriers I had encountered, the support I had longed for but rarely received. The name Constellation was chosen with intention, I explained. A constellation is a group of stars forming a recognizable pattern. Individually, each star shines with its own light, but together, they create something greater, a formation that has guided travelers for centuries. That's the essence of this mentorship network, individual brilliance coming together to illuminate paths for others. The presentation continued with testimonials from several of our scholarship recipients, each sharing how the Foundation's support had transformed not just their own prospects, but their children's futures as well. Their stories resonated deeply with the audience, putting human faces to the statistics about generational poverty and the barriers to advancement for single parents. After the formal program concluded and the reception began, I circulated among the attendees, engaging in conversations about the Foundation's work and potential collaborations. Amid the networking, I noticed Meredith making her way toward me, navigating carefully through the crowd with her infant daughter. "Olivia," she greeted me with a genuine smile. "That was truly inspiring. Congratulations on creating something so meaningful." "Thank you, Meredith, and thank you for coming. I didn't expect to see you here." She adjusted her sleeping daughter slightly. "I wouldn't have missed it, after our conversation a few months ago. Well, let's just say your example has been more influential than you might realize." I glanced at the peaceful infant. "And this must be Lily? She's beautiful." "Thank you. Would you like to hold your granddaughter?" The question caught me by surprise. Despite the tentative reconciliation with James, I had maintained a respectful distance during Meredith's final months of pregnancy and the early weeks of Lily's life, allowing the new parents space to find their footing without pressure or expectations. "I'd be honored," I replied softly. As Meredith carefully transferred the sleeping infant to my arms, I felt an unexpected surge of emotion. Not the automatic, obligation-laden connection I might once have assumed was my role as a grandmother, but something more authentic, a genuine appreciation for this new life and her unique potential. "She has your eyes," Meredith observed. "Or James's eyes, which are your eyes." I smiled, studying the delicate features of my granddaughter. "How are things with you and James, if you don't mind my asking?" Meredith's expression turned thoughtful. "Better. Different. More honest. I think. We've made some significant changes." "Oh, we sold the house," she said simply. "Used the equity to pay off our debts and put a down payment on a much smaller place in Westview. It's not the prestigious address my mother wanted for us, but it's peaceful. It feels like ours in a way the other house never did." I nodded, understanding. "Completely." "And your mother's reaction?" A small, wry smile played at Meredith's lips. "She was horrified, of course, accused us of downgrading and throwing away opportunities. But something interesting happened when we stood firm in our decision. She eventually adjusted. She's still opinionated, still convinced she knows best, but there's a new respect there. As if our willingness to make decisions contrary to her expectations somehow proved we're actual adults. That's often how boundaries work, I observed. When consistently maintained, they tend to reshape relationships in healthier directions." "I've noticed that," she agreed. "Which brings me to something I wanted to discuss with you. I've been thinking about returning to work, but with a different focus." She hesitated, then continued with more confidence. "Before I met James, before I got caught up in creating the perfect life, I was actually quite passionate about education policy. I've been researching flexible positions in that field, opportunities that would allow me to use my skills while still being present for Lily." "That sounds like a wonderful direction," I encouraged her. "Have you found anything promising?" "Actually, yes. There's a research position with the Education Policy Institute that would be perfect. Part-time initially, with flexibility to grow. The only issue is—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "The application requires examples of relevant experience, and most of my recent work has been in architectural design. I was hoping you might look over my application. Materials, perhaps offer some guidance on how to position my transferable skills." I recognized what she wasn't asking for: financial support, strings pulled, problems solved externally. Instead, she was seeking mentorship, guidance, the benefit of experience. It was precisely the kind of help I was now most comfortable providing. "I'd be happy to review your materials," I told her. "And I might introduce you to Diana Chen at the Foundation. She has a background in education policy and could offer specific insights about the field. Gratitude flashed across Meredith's features. That would be incredibly helpful. Thank you. As we continued talking, Lily stirred slightly in my arms, her tiny fingers flexing before she settled back into sleep. The weight of her, so light yet so significant, reminded me of life's continuous renewal, how each generation carries forward both the burdens and the possibilities of those who came before. "How is James adjusting to fatherhood?" I asked, gently rocking my granddaughter. "Better than either of us expected," Meredith admitted. "He's discovered a patience I didn't know he possessed. And a creativity, too. He's the one who can always calm her when she's fussy, who invents the little games that make her smile." She paused, then added with gentle insight, "I think he's determined to be the kind of parent he needed when he was younger." The observation wasn't stated as criticism, merely as truth, one that touched me deeply nonetheless. James was breaking patterns, creating a new template for parenthood based not on what he had received, but on what he had longed for. That's the most anyone can hope for as a parent, I reflected. That our children learn from both our successes and our failures. That they carry forward what was nurturing and leave behind what was not. Later that evening, after the event concluded, I invited Eleanor, Julia, Marguerite, and Caroline back to my home for a more intimate celebration. As we gathered in the sunroom with glasses of champagne, I felt a sense of deep contentment. Not the passive satisfaction of having arrived somewhere, but the dynamic peace of being fully engaged in a life aligned with my values. "A toast," Eleanor proposed, raising her glass, "to the Winters Foundation and its visionary founder. Victoria would be immensely proud." "She certainly would," Julia agreed, "though I suspect she wouldn't be surprised. She always saw your potential, Olivia, even when you couldn't see it yourself." "Speaking of potential," Caroline interjected, "have you given any thought to the board's suggestion about the CEO position at Meridian? Raymond mentioned it again today." Following Brendan Foster's departure, Meridian had been operating with an interim CEO while the board conducted a search for permanent leadership. In recent weeks, several board members had approached me about considering the position myself, a possibility I would never have imagined 6 months earlier. "I'm still reflecting on it," I answered honestly. "There's a part of me that's drawn to the challenge, to the opportunity to shape Meridian's future according to Victoria's vision. But I'm wary of allowing any single role to become all-consuming. Again, my life has more dimensions now." Marguerite, who had been listening quietly, offered her perspective. "The question isn't whether you're capable. We all know you are. The question is whether accepting the role would expand or contract your authentic self-expression." Her framing resonated deeply. This was the new metric by which I evaluated opportunities. Not status or security or others' expectations, but whether a choice would allow me to express more or less of my genuine self. "That's precisely what I've been considering," I acknowledged. "If I were to accept, it would need to be on terms that honor all aspects of who I am now. My leadership at Meridian, yes, but also my work with the foundation, my creative pursuits, my personal relationships." "So you'd redefine the role, rather than allowing the role to define you," Caroline observed with approval. "That's exactly the kind of leadership Meridian needs." As our conversation continued, touching on everything from art acquisitions to upcoming foundation initiatives to the political climate, I was struck by the richness of this circle I had created. Women of substance engaged in meaningful exchange, challenging and supporting one another without competition or performance. This, too, was part of my transformation, the capacity to form relationships based on authentic connection rather than utility or obligation. To choose companions who stimulated my intellect, who respected my boundaries, who appreciated my complexity, without expecting me to diminish myself for their comfort. The evening eventually wound down, my friends departing with warm embraces and promises of continued collaboration. Alone in my home, I wandered through the quiet rooms, appreciating how each space reflected some aspect of my reclaimed identity. The library with its books and piano speaking to my intellectual and creative dimensions. The sunroom designed for contemplation and connection, the home office equipped for both foundation work and potential meridian leadership. My phone chimed with an incoming message from James. Meredith told me she saw you today. Thank you for being kind to her and... Lily, I'm trying to be better. To see people for who they are, not what they can give me. I learned that from you, both from your example and from your absence when I failed to value you properly. If you're open to it, I'd like to bring Lily to visit this weekend. No agenda, no requests. Just a son introducing his daughter to her remarkable grandmother. The message brought a smile to my face. Not because it was perfect, or because our relationship had been magically healed, but because it reflected genuine effort and growth. James was doing his own work, finding his own path toward greater authenticity and healthier relationships. I replied simply, I'd like that very much. Saturday afternoon would be perfect. The garden is lovely this time of year. Setting down my phone, I moved to the grand windows overlooking the city lights below. In the reflection of the glass, I could see myself, not just the external changes in appearance and environment, but the deeper transformation in how I carried myself, how I occupied space, how I engaged with the world. 6 months earlier, I had been defined primarily by what I provided to others: support, solutions, sacrifice. Now I stood in my own fullness, offering connection and wisdom, where appropriate but no longer diminishing myself to elevate others. The shift wasn't about becoming someone new, but about excavating who I had always been beneath layers of conditioning and expectation. The journey would continue, of course. Transformation isn't a destination, but a continuous unfolding. There would be moments of backsliding into old patterns, challenges to newly established boundaries, opportunities for deeper integration of all I was learning. But the foundation had been laid, not just for the organization bearing my name, but for a life guided by authentic self-expression rather than external validation. A life where worth wasn't measured by utility to others, but recognized as inherent and undiminished. A life where power wasn't something to apologize for, but to wield with intention and integrity. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the conversation about Meridian's CEO position. The possibilities both excited and challenged me, an opportunity to lead not from a place of proving my value, as I might once have approached such a role, but from a place of confident contribution, of offering my unique perspective and capabilities, not because I needed the validation, but because the organization could genuinely benefit from what I had to give. Whether I ultimately accepted the position or not, the mere fact that I was considering it on my own terms, evaluating how it would fit into my life, rather than how I would mold myself to fit the role, represented profound growth. In the quiet of my bedroom, I opened the leather-bound journal Marguerite had given me months earlier. Though I had completed her initial homework long ago, I had continued the practice of regular reflection, documenting my evolving understanding of who I was becoming. Tonight, I wrote, "The greatest expansion isn't external, more possessions, more status, more validation, but internal, the capacity to contain multitudes within oneself. To honor the full spectrum of one's gifts and needs without apology. To recognize that authenticity isn't a fixed destination, but a continuous choice to align one's outer expression with one's inner truth. The inheritance that transformed my life wasn't the money, wasn't the shares, wasn't the property. It was the catalyst for self-recognition, for claiming what was already mine but had been buried under years of compromise and expectation. The true fortune was the discovery of my own inherent worth, a wealth that can never be taken away. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Meridian Industries' executive conference room as the board meeting concluded. 1 year had passed since I had accepted the position as CEO, with carefully negotiated terms that preserved my involvement with the Winters Foundation and maintained space for my personal pursuits. "Exceptional quarter, Olivia," Raymond Sullivan commented as board members gathered their materials. "The sustainability initiatives are showing returns ahead of projections, and employee retention is at an all-time high." "Thank you, Raymond. The credit belongs to the entire team," I replied, accepting the compliment with grace, but redirecting the praise appropriately, a leadership approach I had refined over the past 12 months. After the room cleared, Caroline remained behind, her tablet displaying our afternoon schedule. "The Foundation Committee meets at 2, followed by your mentoring session with Abigail at 4. Your evening is clear except for Lily's birthday dinner at 7. "Perfect," I nodded, gathering my notes. "Has Diana confirmed the venue for next month's Constellation graduation ceremony?" "Yes, the Phillips Gallery is confirmed. They're enthusiastic about hosting. Apparently, their director is quite impressed with the Foundation's impact metrics from the first year." I smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The Winters Foundation had exceeded even my optimistic projections, supporting 47 single mothers through education and career advancement programs in its first 18 months. More significantly, our Constellation mentorship network had expanded to include over 100 volunteer mentors across diverse industries, creating pathways for women who might otherwise have been trapped by circumstance. My driver waited, discreetly as I exited Meridian's headquarters. The past year had established a rhythm to my life, structured but flexible, purposeful but balanced. 3 days weekly at Meridian, where I had implemented Victoria's vision of conscious capitalism, with remarkable success. 2 days dedicated to foundation work, mentoring participants, and expanding our programs. Evenings and weekends preserved for personal interests, relationships, and reflection. The Foundation's offices occupied the ground floor of a renovated, industrial building in the Arts District, its design reflecting the organization's ethos, accessible but dignified, professional but welcoming. Natural light filled the open workspace where staff collaborated on program development, participant support, and community outreach. Diana Chen, the Foundation's executive director, greeted me as I arrived. A former education policy specialist, with a doctorate from Stanford, Diana brought both academic rigor and authentic compassion to her role. "We've received 17 new applications for the fall cohort," she reported as we walked toward the conference room. "Remarkable candidates, nurses returning for advanced degrees, engineers completing interrupted education, entrepreneurs developing socially conscious business models. The selection committee will have difficult decisions to make. Perhaps we should consider expanding the cohort size," I suggested. "The returns on our investments in these women have been extraordinary." Diana nodded thoughtfully. "I'll prepare an impact analysis and budget projection for the committee to consider." The meeting proceeded efficiently, reviewing current participants' progress, mentorship outcomes, and strategic initiatives for the coming year. What struck me most powerfully, sitting at the head of the table guiding the discussion, was how thoroughly this work engaged every aspect of my capabilities: my business acumen, my emotional intelligence, my lived experience as a single mother who had navigated professional advancement against significant odds. This integration of my full self into meaningful work represented the most profound aspect of my transformation. No longer compartmentalized, no longer diminished to fit others' expectations, I brought my whole authentic being to each endeavor. After the meeting concluded, I met with Abigail Torres, a Constellation participant pursuing her master's degree in environmental engineering while raising 2 young children. Our monthly mentoring sessions had evolved from formal guidance to genuine exchange as Abigail progressed in her program and secured an internship with a leading sustainability firm. I received an offer for a full-time position after graduation, she announced, her expression reflecting both pride and slight trepidation. The compensation is excellent. The work aligns perfectly with my interests, but... She hesitated. But you're concerned about the impact on your family rhythms, I suggested gently. Exactly. The position involves occasional travel, longer hours during project implementations. I want this opportunity, but I don't want my children to feel my absence as a loss. Rather than offering immediate solutions or reassurances, I asked, "What values are most important to you in making this decision?" The question gave her pause. "Being present for my children," she replied thoughtfully. "Contributing meaningfully to environmental solutions, financial independence, personal growth." She reflected further. "I want my children to see me engaged in work that matters, to understand that my absence isn't abandonment, but purposeful participation in something larger than ourselves." "Those are clarifying values," I acknowledged. "Now, how might you design a structure that honors each of them, even knowing there will be necessary compromises and adjustments?" Our conversation explored practical strategies, negotiating flexible hours during non-project periods, creating special rituals for connection when work demanded more attention, involving her children in understanding her work's importance. But more significantly, it addressed the deeper questions of identity and purpose that every woman faces when navigating professional advancement alongside motherhood. "What I'm learning," Abigail reflected toward the end of our session, "is that there's no perfect balance, only intentional choices aligned with my deepest values." "That's wisdom many people never achieve," I told her sincerely. "The recognition that we can't have everything simultaneously, but we can have what matters most to us if we're willing to design our lives with intention." As we concluded, Abigail shared something unexpected. "My son's school project this month was about heroes, people who inspire others through their actions. He chose you." The statement caught me completely off guard. "Me? But he's never even met me." She smiled. "He's heard me talk about the foundation, about this opportunity that changed our trajectory. In his 7-year-old understanding, you're the person who helped his mom become stronger and happier. That makes you a hero in his eyes." The simple observation touched me deeply, a reminder that our actions create ripples extending far beyond our immediate awareness. Each woman supported by the foundation represented not just an individual transformation, but a shift in her children's understanding of possibility, a rewriting of intergenerational patterns. After leaving the foundation offices, I returned home to prepare for Lily's second birthday dinner. James and Meredith had invited me to join their small celebration at a casual riverside restaurant, the kind of authentic family gathering that prioritized genuine connection over appearances. My relationship with James had evolved significantly over the past year. The initial awkwardness following our confrontation had gradually given way to something unexpected: mutual respect. Not the automatic deference a child shows a parent out of obligation, but the earned respect one adult offers another whose character and choices they genuinely admire. James had undergone his own transformation, prompted partly by my example, but ultimately driven by his own recognition that the life he had been pursuing wasn't bringing him genuine fulfillment. He had left his high-pressure marketing position for a role with a nonprofit focused on financial literacy for young adults. Though the salary was considerably lower, his increased engagement and reduced stress had improved both his individual well-being and his family relationships. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.